So I wanted to share some of the stories of residency and how God just works in every part of your life. So one of the things that I really wanted to do when I was in medical school was pray with my patients. But since they're not really your patients, I was just waiting until residency started, and once it did, God was just really good to me. So I didn't get the residency program that I had put down as number one on my list. It was actually number 3, and I was a little disappointed, not because I actually wanted to go to the my number 1 and 2 choices, but just because of the prestige involved. But I remember God just saying, you know, the place that you go, there will be more Christians than you realize there. And after I came back from my trip to India, I started my residency program, and I was a little shocked because it was very secular, let's just say. And I just come from an environment where we're praying with our patients before every surgery, and if anybody had any issues that needed God, we would just refer them there. And here I am, and it felt like nobody was a Christian. And I was like, God, I thought you promised me that there would be more Christians than I realized, and I don't see anybody. But my second month, I was doing my medicine rotation, and the first 3 days, I worked with an attending who, that weekend when I was on call, he pulls me aside and he says, Sapna, let me teach you how to pray with your patients. And so that was the only 3 days I ever worked with him in all 3 years, but that was just what I needed. And then as residency went on, it was kind of funny because God kept putting people in my path, and I just realized that this was the perfect residency for me. One time I had a patient who had renal cancer, and I had diagnosed it, and I just felt horrible, and I wanted to be able to offer her something, and so out of my mouth blurted out, can I pray for you, after I told her the diagnosis, and she kind of looks at me like that, and she said no, and anyways, we went on, and I referred her to all the different places, and then that day I was being observed, and my attending who was observing me, she said, you know, Sapna, and I don't think she was a Christian, but she said, Sapna, you know, like, I know praying is important for you, and but you saw the reaction that that patient had. Let's come up with a better way to do that. And so she actually came up with a better way for me to pray with my patients, even though she didn't really believe. And from that point on, that's kind of what I used, tweaked it a little bit. And by the end of residency, I was offering to pray with almost every patient of mine, and just had some really cool encounters with patients. By the end of residency, when I was having one of my attendings following me around, I'd gotten so comfortable praying for my patients that it was just a usual thing for me. But I'd still get a little nervous when my attendings were following me around, but I decided I'm just going to show them how I really do it. And so I prayed with a lot of my patients, and usually if there was a new patient, I would always take what I call a spiritual history, where I would just ask them what they believe, and then at the end I'll tell them that I offered to pray with all my patients, and if they're interested in that, I can pray with them, and then give them the option of if they want me to ask that question again in the future or not. And it was my last patient of the day, and I was so glad it was finally the last patient of my day, and I did my whole thing with her, and she was a new patient. And as I walked out the door, I just remember thinking, oh my goodness, I didn't ask her a spiritual history. And I was just thinking that, and my attending, she turns to me and she's like, Sapna, my husband is an atheist and my daughter is a Christian, and how are you going to draw me to your side if you don't show me how it's done? Referring to the fact that I hadn't asked that last patient about her spiritual history, and she went on to say, you know, like, I've never seen a bond this strong between a patient and a doctor before, as I've seen between your patients as you pray with them. And so, yeah, I feel so blessed for having gone to the residency that God chose. And just, you know, God is perfect in all that he does. And even during residency, I had a chance to just share about God with so many of my friends. I mean, everybody in my residency knew I was a Christian, but I ended up getting to share with my attendings as well. My surgery, attending my first one, I saw these pictures on his wall, and they look like Indians. And so I started talking to him, and I found out that he had volunteered with the same organization that I had volunteered with just before starting residency. And so we started talking, and then he ended up becoming semi-regular at our prayer meetings on Friday nights as a family. There was another attending for surgery that I had, and he was just asking me, well, why do you want to become a medical missionary? And I was sharing my testimony with him, and we started on the top floor of the hospital, like the 14th floor, and we were making our way down to the ICU. And every time we'd go in to see a patient, I would stop talking, we'd see the patient, and then he'd say, okay, continue. And we made it all the way down to the 7th floor to the ICU, and my story still wasn't done. And so it was kind of funny. So here's him, here's me, and then there are all these nurses gathered around, and maybe some residents and medical students, I don't know. And he just tells everybody to just wait until I am done sharing my story. And later on, he ended up getting cancer, and he started coming to our prayer meetings as well, because he just remembered everything that I had shared. And so yeah, God is a good God, and He's got our lives totally planned out. And I just encourage you to just trust Him and be thankful for everything, knowing that He's got a plan and He's got a purpose, and it's going to be great.